Staff, thank you all for making time to come. Special thank you to Mr. Masipa, who has done the groundwork preparing you. We did a lot of the coverage of how to get onto the Cambridge website, etc. yesterday. It's going to be very important that we make use of the Cambridge website. Cambridge is designed in such a way that wherever you are, anywhere in the world, as long as you're registered with Cambridge, you can access anything on their website. Okay, so today I'm just going to be doing an introduction to global perspectives. In 2018, Mr. Masipa, Tato, and I think Theo and I all went to the introduction of global perspectives. It was introduced in 2018 for the first time. There are a couple of changes, but very minor for the 2023 midway syllabus change. Okay, but today we're just going to be introducing global perspectives as in getting you ready to start using it for next year. Okay, so what I've done is I've equipment failure. Okay. So we're just going to run through a couple of slides where I'm just going to be sharing and hopefully moving around quite freely and interacting with you as we go through this. Okay, so a couple of things. We're going to talk about the 5 pillars of Cambridge learning, which include developing learners who are, number 1, reflective, able to develop the ability to learn, innovative, equipped for new or future challenges. They are confident in working with information, ideas of their own and those of others. Okay. Engaged intellectually and socially, ready to make a difference. And lastly, responsible for themselves, responsive and respectful of others. Now, these are the 5 pillars that make up Cambridge education. Okay? This is not just some nice 5 things. This is the pillar. And these pillars mustn't be compromised when we move from the academic subjects to global perspectives. And we'll see at the end how this complements what global perspectives is trying to do. Okay. So as we continue, I'm just going to be showing you a little bit about why global perspectives was introduced. Okay. So the question is, why did Cambridge come up with this subject? Okay. At the introduction of the workshop we did in 2018, the lady who was presenting to us told us that there was a huge complaint about children growing up in Britain and going to work in the rest of Europe. Basically, they said that British children were very closed off. They were not innovative, creative, and they didn't know how to work with others and teams. And it's because of the type of education they received. So it came as a complaint out of Europe, essentially. So why global perspectives? So we want to just look a little bit at why the subject was introduced. So the first thing that their research led them to is the first that there's the changing nature of work globally. Work has changed, and I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw incredible change. This is a picture of a robot that I actually physically saw in March this year at Next Care Hospital. One of these was going to dock itself, and I was the only one that was shocked seeing this thing, because I looked, and everyone else was just walking past like, we've got robots now. I was like, what's going on here? So I actually recorded it, and then the security guard and he tossed me out. But that was me. I was shocked. I was amazed. But this is it. And this is a professor in Malaysia who was creating a robot to receive people during COVID-19. Because we couldn't have people contact, he was designing robots that would receive you, take your temperature, take your stats, do everything. So it was automated robots that were already functioning during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's incredible innovations were done during the last 2-3 years to combat the epidemic. Okay? The changing nature of work. The second thing here is that we are having a change in labor markets. People can now work from home, people can work remotely. Sometimes you can be hired by overseas companies, but you work in your house virtually as part of a team. So labor markets are changing. Immigration laws are changing everywhere, globally, all the time, because of the changing nature of work. What else is happening across the world? The work environments are increasingly technology rich. Once upon a time, you would have field workers doing this. Now drones are out on the markets, fields, and it's all automated. There's a laptop. This is a guy in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere, with tons of these machines, going out there and doing work. Recently in South Africa, there's a company that has introduced drone tech to school. So kids, by the time they finish Form 6, can all operate drones. As in, they can go and work on a farm and be manually running drones. What do drones do? They can do your spraying, they do your surveying. Some people are into cattle ranching. There's so many cattle, they can't physically count them. So get the drone up, take images, pictures, and then physically count what the stock is like. Okay, and this is all where the world is going. Okay, let's continue. Okay, and what else is happening? There's the innovation and problem-solving skills need globally. We are more and more in need of a generation that can change the way they think and change the way they do things, because the problems that you will see now on the next point, the problems we are facing are unprecedented. Okay, they're things that have never happened during our lifetime, and we're having to respond, and we're having to have young people and old people thinking on their feet and changing with the world around us. Okay, so the other thing, which was a preamble to the research that they did before starting Global Perspectives, is that the problems that workers are facing is ill-defined. Okay, this is a picture of a shop in America during Black Friday. I can tell you they were not great. Imagine trying to control this crowd and get everyone to get their TVs or whatever. This is people fighting. You're holding your TV, it's mine, but anyone else can grab it and do all sorts of things. So the problems that workers will face are ill-defined. This is another thing that Cambridge came up with. Okay? And the last thing that they did during their research is they came up with the fact that they are realizing that people are increasingly working in teams to solve problems. They're realizing that the greatest strength that humanity has is working in teams. And so the more people work in teams, the more they can problem solve on a greater scale. So these are all the things that led to Cambridge sitting down to say, we want to look at global perspectives. The other problem they also recognize is that we're living with what is known as the Google generation. Everything's on Google, YouTube. Nowadays, if you have a problem at home, your TV is not connecting, what's the first thing you do? You go to YouTube. The minute you start feeling your throat is aching, whatever, before you think of going to the doctor, you go away. Google, in case you might be able to treat yourself at home. And this is the nature of the world we live in. So the Google generation and the increased availability of information. Some of you may have heard people talk about we are living in the information age. And we are. Information is being churned out at an alarming rate, but it does create a problem. And these are three things as well Cambridge instructed us on, and we start with the first one. The first one is that there's a growing need to help learners analyze and verify the credibility and utility of information. Just because information is on the internet doesn't mean it's factual, doesn't mean it's true. You've got to verify, you've got to analyze, is this true? Anybody can post anything, anytime, and Google picks it up. You know, if you look at the malicious posts that are being posted right now about world events, there's information everywhere. False information, sensitive information, people are posting for the sake of it. Learners need to be able to evaluate the appropriateness of information. So if we send kids home to go and research on something, we've also got to guide them to say, what's appropriate and what's not. Otherwise, kids will just go home. I remember giving a project 2-3 years ago, and a student came back with what felt like a professor's research that they had downloaded. And we were talking about body systems. He came with a book like this, it says, there's the project. And I said, first of all, where did you find this information? Like, do you even understand what you downloaded? But so you said we must go, and I said, yes, but it must be information that you can understand so that you can present it. And that sort of thing. And then lastly, learners need to intelligently apply the information that they're finding online and in other places. Okay, so this is all a background behind why Global Perspectives became a talking point, and eventually it was enacted. So what is Global Perspectives? This is a subject that developed the learner's ability to think critically about a wide range of local, regional, and global issues where there's always more than one point of view. If you look at the hatred that's in the world right now, if you look at the war that's being fought as we speak, all of these stem from differing worldviews about things. Russia thinks that they're cleansing Ukraine of bad elements. That's their worldview. Ukraine is like, you're killing us. That's their perspective, and different people have different takes on this. But this has all got to do with perspective. How do you see the problem? From which way are you looking at it? Okay. Learners are able to study a broad range of topics that they are interested in, for example, music, sports, and technology. And I'm going to show you the topics that are set in the curriculum framework. Okay, so you don't have to say, I'm going to teach this, etc. There are challenges, we'll talk about that as well. But there's a wide range of topics that literally cover most aspects of life as we know it. The other point is that topics, or challenges as they call them, are only a vehicle for developing the Cambridge Global Perspective skills. So the topics are not an end in themselves, they are a vehicle for you to develop the skills. And we're going to look at what are global perspectives skills. Okay. So this is a subject also where pupils have to work in teams. Remember we spoke about the need for teamwork. And note that there is no summative assessment of the subjects. In other words, there's not going to be a test at the end of each topic where they get a mark. But however, formative assessment, so in other words, assessment for learning is included in global perspective. So when you're assessing, there are specific learning points and criteria which you'll see on the sample challenges that are on the website right now. Those are the only two that are available, so I've printed those for everyone to see the difference between a stage 1 and a stage 6 type of challenge. All right, so global perspectives, global Cambridge Primary Global Perspective skills. I'm going to first of all list them, and then I'm going to go into each one and just show you. I'm summarizing a 37-page document, okay, called the Global Perspectives Curriculum Framework. You'll see now how I've summarized 37 pages. So there's research, which is the chief skill, then there's analysis, then there's evaluation, there's reflection, there's collaboration, there's communication. And these 6 skills are the 6 pillars of global perspectives, okay? Research, analysis, evaluation, reflection, collaboration, communication, okay? Now, one of the things that global perspectives also encourages us is to understand that these skills work interdependently. You can't look at analysis on its own and not relate it to communication. You can't look at research on its own and not relate it to evaluation, to reflection, to all these other things. And that's why I said at the beginning that Cambridge's 5 pillars that make up Cambridge's education philosophy and global perspectives complement each other. They're just different in the sense that the focus is not on academic attainment, A's, B's, or C's. It's more about skills development, which are these skills that are interdependent. All right, so working together is key for these to work. So I've researched, for example, what I've done is I've tried to just break it down to say that in each of the stages, stage 1 to stage 6, the elements of research are the same. The difference is the depth in which you will go with each of them. So under research from stage 1, this is your little babies all the way up to your standard 7s, they all have to do constructing research questions. That's under research. They all have to do information skills. Okay, they all have to do conducting research, the process of doing it. They all have to do recording their findings. So when you're researching, and if you think about it, most of these students are going to go to university. What is the essence of higher learning? Research. And if they're starting to learn this in standard 1, can you imagine what they'll be like by the time they go to university? They've been doing it their whole lives. It's part of who they are. It's part of the skill set they possess. We didn't get this when we were at school. Most of us started learning. We saw the word research when we walked into university. You're like, whoa, what's going on? But this is now something that's been integrated into the very fabric of education from the very youngest of learners. So what I've done, summatively, just to help everyone get a bit of a picture. The curriculum framework highlights this in great detail, okay? But what I've done is I said, for each of these, remember, these skills vary from stage 1 to stage 6. The topics are exactly the same, but the level is different. So what I've done is I've done little examples for each of these so that you can see what we're talking about. The first example is under stage 1. under constructing research, okay? It's supposed to be constructing research questions, so I have a mistake over there, but don't worry. So constructing research questions, you begin to participate in simple investigations and ask basic questions to find information and opinions. This is what you would do typically with your stage 1 learners. Then under the same strand, okay, conducting research questions, you, at a higher stage, look at the difference. Conduct investigations using interviews or questionnaires. That's exactly what they do at university. But now we can get our youngest learners starting to do this at primary school. It's introduced at this stage. It is developed through the stages up until the stage where a standard 6, standard 7 pupil knows what a questionnaire is, understands why we use questionnaires, and how we gather information for research through that. So for stage 5 and 6, conducting research, conduct investigations using interviews or questionnaires to test a prediction. All right? There's a lot of this in the higher stages. And begin to answer a research question. So now kids realize that we don't just assume stuff. We have to research. Let's find out, what do people actually want? Maybe a company wants to set up Disneyland in Botswana. They've got to research. Is there a market for it? Do people enjoy this sort of thing? Will people spend money doing this sort of thing? You know? So research is a key component. I'm going to run through the other 5 skills. The second one is analysis. Okay? And the sub-strands of analysis are identifying perspectives. We spoke about global perspectives being about how we see things and our different perspectives. So we need to identify perspectives. We need to interpret data. When you collect information, are you able to interpret the information and understand what the information is saying? And can you make connections between the information that you've just done? So you research. The next thing is to analyze the information, right? Then after that, what's happening? You're making connections, and you are now leading yourself towards solving of the problem that you've identified right at the beginning. All right? Again, for each of these, I said, remember, these skills vary from stage 1 to 6. Let's look at an example. So under stage 2, interpreting data. For stage 2, the objective is to recognize that graphical and numerical data can show information about a topic. So it's general, okay? But as it gets more advanced, look at stage 3 and 4. Interpreting data here is now draw simple conclusions from graphical or numerical data. Now they've got the data presented to them. What can you conclude from the given data? All of a sudden, higher thinking skills are being invoked. All right? So if we look at skill number 3, please stop me at any time if you have questions. Don't have to wait at the end. We can flow together like that. I'm as nervous as anything, but you're all looking very serious. Anyway, evaluating sources. You have no idea. And evaluating arguments. We spoke at the beginning about the need for information to be evaluated and analyzed, and its usefulness, its appropriateness needs to be done. So this topic or concept of evaluation, this skill of evaluation is very important because it's the process of evaluating. You've got all this information, now we need to evaluate. We need to evaluate the source of the information. We need to evaluate the arguments around what it is that we're looking at. Okay? Now, these are the only 2 substrands for evaluation. These skills vary from stage 1 to 6. Let's look at the difference. So, under stage 1, evaluating sources, select a source relevant to a given topic and explain reasons for that choice. I found a book at home, I found a magazine, I chose it because I could find easy information. That's what a young learner would say. Okay? As they go higher up, we're now wanting them to be more critical of the evaluation. So, stage 3 and 4, we would say, well, let's discuss the source. Let's recognize that the author of this source has a viewpoint that they're trying to sell you. If you go to, I don't know, this guy that's recently been banned from TikTok, where everyone is saying is being too male. Oh. You guys know the guy? I can't remember his name. Hustlers University, the founder of Hustlers University, he's been banned because women felt like he hates us. They managed to convince a lot of people, so he's been banned. Now his daughter is doing all his talks, so it's interesting. But he has a clear viewpoint whenever he presents something. So if you use him as a source, he has an agenda with what he's sharing. And so people felt he was not appropriate and he's been banned from multiple social media platforms. Right, skill number 4, reflection. This is part of the 5 key pillars of Cambridge education, but we also use it in global perspectives. We look at things like personal contribution. Remember, global perspectives is about teamwork. So when you're working in a team of people, you need to be able to consider your personal contribution to the team. And when we actually do the checkpoint in a couple of years when we're ready, there will actually be marks for each person. So you'll be able to evaluate your own contribution to the team. What did you do? What did you add? What did others in your group do? Etc., etc. So there's your personal contribution. There's the teamwork component. How do you measure that? How did we work together as a team? There's personal viewpoints. There's how you view your contribution as well. And there's how you view the points of what you were discussing in the particular task or challenge that you were given. And then there's personal learning. What did you learn by working with a team of other people? What are the takeaways? What did this experience do for you? Okay? And I said, as we'll be looking at all of these, the skills vary from stage 1 to 6. Look at the differences now, look at stage 2. Teamwork. Identify an idea that someone else contributed to achieve a shared outcome. So they're not asking you what you did. Tell us what somebody else contributed to the group, to the project, to the task, to the challenge. And then higher up, look at this. Identify benefits and challenges of working together to achieve a shared outcome. What are the things that were hard when you're working with others? So they never agreed with me, But what are we doing? Global perspectives. We're starting at a local, we're going regional, we're going international. We're realizing that everyone around us is different. We all think differently. We all process information differently. We all see the world differently. But in the midst of all that, we need to be able to collaborate and work together to solve problems. Under the collaboration skill, the sub-strands, cooperation and interdependence. Very, very important. Engaging in teamwork. Now, there's the teamwork as a general thing, and then there's the actual engaging in teamwork. And the challenges are structured in such a way that each of these skills is testable, but in a formative way as opposed to a summative way. All right? So, I mentioned that already. Let's look at the difference now. Stage 3 and 4, cooperation and interdependence. The team allocate given tasks to team members to achieve a shared outcome. So delegation is done. You're not really asked what you think, you're just told, listen, you'll do this, you'll do this, you'll do this. Look at what happens as we go higher. The team plan and divide tasks fairly to achieve a shared outcome, considering the skills of the team. Now there's evaluation. There's who's best to do this. If we're going to perform and beat everyone else, we need our best players doing these tasks. And this is growth. Okay? They also realize that they've got a limited time to complete the task, and so they want to be efficient in how they work. And isn't this how the world works? You know, Manchester United was struggling until they brought a very good manager. And they've been on the up. A couple of new players, changed the system. The outcome and fortunes of the team are completely transformed. Right. Under communication, which is part of the skills of global perspectives. Okay, look at what's here. It's communicating information. Okay, how do you communicate information? That's looked at in great detail. Okay, listening and responding. Recently in my class, we were just talking at the beginning of the term to say, why do we have 2 ears and 1 mouth? All my kids looked at me and they thought, well, I've never thought about that. I said, because you're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak. Eyes were like, what? Nobody ever told us that. So listening and responding is really, really important. Okay? Now let's look at how these vary from stage to stage. Stage 2, listening and responding. You're listening to others in class discussions and you respond with simple and relevant questions. That is the skill that you are being tested on, and that's the skill that you're expected to start introducing at stage 2. And as you go higher up, listening and responding, you present information about a given topic clearly. Remember, our objective is to communicate. Okay, so you can start giving them tasks so that they can actually present information clearly on a given topic with the appropriate structure of presentation of that information. Okay, so that's under communication as a skill. Just checking our time. Doing okay. Doing okay. Right, so the topics or challenges, okay, these are the program topics in the curriculum framework. These are not really negotiable, but you don't have to stick to, like you don't have to follow to say this, this, this. What you will do is you will have challenges that you're given, and then you can choose the topic that fits into the challenge, that best brings out. Remember, the topic is a vehicle to bring out the skills. So you need to analyze, my class is like this, what would interest them? What would make them all go crazy with research and finding out? So you've got to find out what their natural interests are, and then choose from any one of these topics. All right, there's lots of them. Sorry if it doesn't look so tidy at the bottom. I tried to fit them all, but yeah, limited space. So each challenge is based on one of the following topics that will help learners to develop their skills while using a personal, local, and global perspective. What are we looking at? So there's things like keeping healthy, moving to a new country, understanding belief, keeping the peace, people, young and old, reduce, reuse, recycle. That's part of that. Sorry, which just came down to the bottom. It's part of the same topic. Rich and poor, the world of work, looking after planet Earth, observing the law. It's a good one. The right to learn. We could talk about that. Locally, what is our position? Regionally, internationally. Okay, sport and leisure. Okay. Values and beliefs, using energy, working with other countries. These are all the topics. Water, food and farming, keeping safe, living and working together. I don't know why it's not showing the full screen. Maybe we can Oh, beautiful. Okay. So moving, communicating, so sharing planet Earth, worldwide. Okay. No. All right. Collaboration. Right. There we go. So water, food, farming, people, moving goods and people, sharing planet Earth, worldwide companies. So these are all the topics. We don't have to cover them in detail. But this is where you would get to choose a topic to best meet the challenge that you've been given for these. There's 6 challenges, one for each stage, and then you choose from one of these topics in order to carry out the task. Okay, so moving on. The role of the teacher. This is very, very important because we're all thinking, oh, this is great, this is grand, this is wonderful, but where do I fit into all this? Okay, so first thing, the role of the teacher is to support each learner and team in their initial preparation to do the following. First of all, to understand the nature of the task or challenge. So when the challenge is presented, and what I've done here is I've given you a challenge sample. So just take out your challenge samples very quickly. And the first one here, the challenge is growing and growing up. This is something that our younger learners can identify because they're all growing, right? So if you look at the learning objectives there's communication, there's research, there's the challenge summary, there's the success criteria. Under the success criteria, these are the ways that you can see that you have successfully taught the learners specific things that you want to do with them for that particular challenge. We won't go into too much detail on this. Like I mentioned, the website has got a very, very, very functional step-by-step how to do each process. There's videos, there's a whole lot of stuff. What I've done is just summarize to get you to understand vaguely, overallly what we're trying to do. So what does growing up mean, for example? These are the sort of questions that you need to guide the young learners to be able to research on that. So the topic or the challenge is understanding growing up. All right? We have topics. There's families as a topic. So you could look at growing up in the context of a family. Okay? In my family, I'm growing, my brother's growing, so-and-so's growing. So you're again trying to get the young learners to recognize that it's not just about them, it's about their growth, but it's also about the growth of those around them. And then we can find out, so how many brothers do you have? And then broaden it, etc. And there's a whole lot of stuff that can happen there with the topic, okay? We can spend more time looking at this in our own time. We are really just trying to summarize. And then the other one is very interesting. This would be for some of the older kids. Okay, imagine this as a challenge. If I was a world leader, imagine getting them to think about politics now. Anyway, There's evaluation. Discuss a source considering the author or purpose and comment on its strength and limitations. So what is the source of research that you're going to be using to understand global leadership? Learners can talk about the reliability of their sources when they carry out their research. So you've got to guide them. The challenge is, if I was a world leader, there's a place for analysis that happens. Learners collect information on a particular issue, checking their data and their sources. So they need to give examples of world leaders. They've got to give examples of where good leadership has been exercised, what was the outcome? Bad leadership was exercised, what was the outcome? And they've got to bring those sources, they've got to be able to discuss, they've got to be able to collaborate, and within their teams, they're all going to be carrying out this task. This scales up all the way to checkpoint where they write an exam. It is quite involving, and you'll see on the video that we'll play right at the end that they recommend that if you're doing global perspectives, depending on the level and the time that you've got allocated, more time must be given to the kids as they get older, because sometimes their challenge must be done in a single day. So they'll begin in the morning, do their research, they'll have access to the internet, do whatever, and then they can have a certain goal to achieve by the end of that particular day with regards to that challenge. Okay? But like I said, we are just getting the overall picture. We have time to familiarize ourselves with what we're doing, especially the challenges. There's only 6 challenges, that's the big news. So it's about understanding what the challenge for each stage is, number 1. And number 2, what are the learning outcomes and the success criteria that we can use as teachers to measure that we are successfully achieving our objectives. So understand the nature of the task or challenge. I've mentioned that. Slow down. Formulate an appropriate team project. So again, the learners need a lot of guidance, as in what is our project going to be about? What are we wanting to do? What are we wanting to achieve? How do we measure that you've succeeded in doing what you're doing? What is the success criteria? So each learner knows that if they manage to do 1, 2, 3, then they've achieved the objective. And then they can move on to the next part of what they're doing. So that's got to be laid out very clearly, and that's where the teacher comes in. Identify a suitable local issue and action. So you've got to choose topics within topics within topics. There's the broad topics, there's the challenge that you want to achieve. Then there's also identifying an issue within the locale, something that every learner in your class can identify with and understand. So it's got to be appropriate to the learners and appropriate to their context, so that they've got a local perspective on something initially. Then as we broaden it out and bring in the research and bring in everything else, we get to hear what other children in the world think about different things related to the same issue. Okay? They'll need to develop organizational skills, teamwork. They've got to know who's doing the writing, who's doing this, who's doing that. So all of that information has got to be collated. But this is the essence of the world we live in. Look at the most developed countries in the world. They're exceptional at these things. Why? Because this is the essence of performing and outperforming your competition. You know, Japan will not always remain the best car manufacturer if they speak, because there's other countries competing for the same market. All right? Focus their research and communicative skills, okay, so that they don't waste time, but they recognize there's a task that needs to be done. Each person has a role to play, and like we mentioned, as they go higher up, they are supposed to profile each other and know each individual person's strengths, so that they work according to their strengths within their